So I'm a professor in arts administration. Up until recently, I was the director of the arts administration program. And now I serve and am moving into the position of senior vice provost for academic affairs. My relationship to CultureWork grew out of my relationship with the arts administration program. Shortly after its founding, there was the opportunity made available through the vice president for research who provided some seed funding so that we could reinvigorate the Institute for Community Arts Studies that had been founded by June King McPhee. As part of that effort to reinvigorate and reimagine the Institute, I believed it was important for us to have a vehicle for communicating about issues associated with community arts. I was familiar with a magazine called High Performance, which had been very inspirational to me. I liked the model of articles which paired theory and practice, but which were primarily practitioner-oriented in presenting issues associated with community arts and how people were dealing with those issues and the kinds of programs that were growing out of those responses. I also, at the same time, believed that we were moving into a time where communication would become increasingly associated with the World Wide Web. With the new arts administration program, we had a website, and I wanted to see if we could pioneer a web-based publication associated with the arts administration program website, but also the Institute for Community Arts Studies website. I think for what's most relevant to me today about CultureWork is to look at the entirety of the articles that have been published in that venue. One of the things that was important to me about CultureWork from the very beginning is that it should be inclusive of as many different types of voices as possible, coming from as many different constituent bases as possible, representing a variety of types of organizations. And I think when we look at the authorship over those 15 years, we see that, and we see that it also has provided an opportunity for graduate students to publish on their research coming out of their master's program, as well as for authors who have been in the profession for quite some time, who can either reflect back and or report on the current work that they're doing and how they're responding to contemporary issues from a position of having more longevity in the field. Well, I think, in response to that question, I appreciated the challenge of working with Robert Volker Morris, to create an online exhibit associated with zines in that format. So I thought that was a particularly challenging opportunity that working with the publication afforded me. So one of the things that I imagined for CultureWork when I first began working with it is that there would be a community that could grow up around it based upon issues that were of mutual concern. In believing that, what I then did initially when I was primarily responsible for recruiting authors for the publication was to engage with people who I knew had common interests. And so I would reach out to people in various fields and ask them if they would like to write for the publication. One of the things that I have also thoroughly enjoyed is that while working closely with the publication, I've had the opportunity to work with a remarkable series of editors who each of those editorships have brought their own particular interest to the publication, their own particular strengths. And so in a sense, as editors should, they shape the publication during the time of their editorship. And so it's been a great pleasure for me to see that this format could work well with a variety of people and approaches. One of the things that I think should occur with CultureWork in the not too distant future is to give some serious attention to an analysis of the issues and approaches that have been taken to the various publications over time. I think it would be interesting for someone or some people to think about those issues and what was happening in the larger socio-political environment at the time that those articles were being written. I think it would be interesting to go back to the early articles and maybe do some follow-ups to see where the issues that were raised in those early articles, what changes may have occurred between when those articles were published and what is occurring now. I think it would also be interesting to consider some of the authors and what they were doing at the time they were writing their articles, and how their own research or their own practice has evolved. So I think, what CultureWork is really lucky to have is this 15-year history. It's a decade and a half, and that could provide some valuable historical analysis, both about the publication itself, but what was happening in the larger arts and cultural world during the time of its existence.